What's up, people? Yes, FIROUZJA, after an incredible first half of the tournament, he started with 2 victories and 3 draws, but at the start of the second half, he lost the 2 games, losing the leadership, and let's see if he can take back the leadership in this game against the world champion GUKESH. Okay, FIROUZJA opened with d4, knight f6 by GUKESH, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, and here black have many choices, but GUKESH go for the Ragozin variation, very popular in 2026. The majority of the elite players are employing this move. And here, Alireza goes for this line of c takes, e takes, and bishop f4. Magnus employed this move many times in 2020 and in the following years too, but in 2020 most. 94 by GUKESH, this is the most aggressive move. Okay, black can play more normal with sword castle or c6, but black just decided to go so sharp with 94. The idea is push g5, h5, and try to create troubles into the f4 bishop, rook c1, and now knight c6 is another interesting move. Knight d2 and g5, like I said, with 94 the game is going to be so sharp. Knight c6, knight d2, g5, for example, if bishop e3, now black can take and just return to e6, h4, but okay, the fight continues because now the black king is not going to have a safe place. In general, both kings now are going to be very, very unsafe. So this could be a possibility to follow the game. Bishop g3 here is another option with this pawn sacrifice, because okay, black have a pawn sacrifice, but white have his 2 rooks very active, and the queen is coming to h5, bishop d3, so white is rook h6 is another possibility, e4. White is very active there, so in general the position with knight e6 is very, very hard. But okay, bishop f5 by GUKESH. It's not the best move according to the machine, but watching this line with the machine, I really think that maybe bishop f5 is the best practical option, because here is a 0-0, but white looks more pleasant. Bishop f5 by GUKESH, and now e3, and the game now GUKESH employ the plan like I say with 94, g5, and now takes and h5, trying to create problems into the g3 bishop. This plan is very typical when the bishop goes to g5 or to f4 to play with 94, g5, h5 is very, very common. Queen b3, good move by FIROUZJA, trying to find counterplay, because if not, h4 is coming, trapping the bishop, and you cannot give a hold because this pawn structure is very, very bad. That's one of the idea of h5, to try to provoke h3 and then take, and not allow white to recapture with the h pawn. So queen b3, great move by FIROUZJA, trying to find counterplay. And here GUKESH sacrificed the pawn, but not in the best way. Was stronger to play first h4 and later go sword castle instead of go sword castle directly. Because if queen here we have c6. Example, bishop this c7, queen e7. If queen c7, here we have f6. That's the key. That in the game we haven't this move. Queen takes and rook takes. And for example, if g4, just bishop g6. The problem is that GUKESH in the game, instead of play h4 first and then sword castle, he plays sword castle directly, right here. And after queen b7, c6, queen c7, here black having the move f6, as in the game, attacking the bishop. So here white just have a pawn up. Okay, black have maybe some counterplay because the knight is active on e4, but this is going to be more or less a extra pawn. Knight d7, and just this is a endgame with a extra pawn. Okay, and these knights maybe a little bit active. These pawns are advanced, but talking clear is a extra pawn for white. So bad opening by GUKESH, who leave the opening with a pawn down. Here knight d2 is not the best plan. My favorite move is just c4, trying to open the white pieces. I understand that white didn't want to open the position with this king in the center. It's understandable, but was fine. Bishop e6 is another possibility, just keeping this pawn here. This bishop is hard to attack. On a6 is coming to b7 one day, is avoiding the rook to be on c8. So one day bishop c7 is coming. Bishop a6 is interesting. Or go with the bishop to a5 and just keeping the bishop safe. Okay, now it's coming one day, the knight is taking this bishop. So place the bishop on a5, safe, defending c3, and now the rook is free to game to b1. Interesting maneuver too. Okay, FIROUZJA playing 82, and I think that the knight was fine on f3. And finally, GUKESH take, and knight f6. 93, rook b8, bishop e2, and king e7. Just a good move, improving the king. a5 is another possibility, of course. King g7, improving the king, good move. Bishop d1, rook f8. Here f3 was very strong for white. Instead of that, he goes for castle, and again f3 was the strongest move. And here, instead of that, he trade bishops, which is not the best idea. Because after take and a4, white is very active, because this pawn is very, very annoying, and we'll go to a3. The two rooks are good place, and later the knight is going to jump here and break with c5, which will happen in the game. Knight c5, a3, knight b3 again, because if not, the rook can enter here one day, so returning to b3. But now knight e4, let's see that black pieces are very, very active, especially both rooks are in, one is in the open fire and the other one is helping to push c5. The knight is active on e4, and the pawn on a3 is very annoying too. So finally, FIROUZJA break with c4, now c5 by GUKESH. Very good move, just opening all his pieces, and the position is more or less balanced. Because okay, we have an extra pawn, but black is very active and he have good counterplay to hold. Now we have many trades in the position, and now f5 was slightly better because the a3 pawn compensates very well, and the space of black is very good. By the way, king f6 is playable too, rook c6, king e7, king f1. Here, okay, he played king e7, who is good. The game is still being draw, but I prefer a little bit more this move. Just trying to take more space, and if king e2, now rook e8, that's the idea. Because the problem of king e7 is you are forcing black to white to go to a6, which is what white wants to do. But okay, king d7 is good, because now black is going to lose the a3 pawn, but he's going to activate so much his pieces with rook c8 and rook c2. Now black is very, very active. White have two extra pawns, but okay, the f2 pawn is going to fall maybe. So for that reason, FIROUZJA with a good criteria, he give back a pawn with knight c5. And okay, the same game is a draw as the majority of the rook same game, but it's not easy to hold. You should play very accurate with black. Rook d3, and here that's why I say that this same game is hard to draw with black, because king e6 by GUKESH was a mistake. I understand that this it's hard to play with black because black have these pawns. Okay, I say that it's well to have this pawn so far advanced, but maybe he have the pawn so much far advanced, and this pawn is very good place here on a2, because if the king comes here to protect the pawn, the rook will come for these pawns, and if not, this pawn is going to advance. And one of the huge black problems is that the rook is going to defend these pawns at the same time that help the a pawn, and black have some troubles to attack the white pawn structure. So the position is very hard. Here GUKESH play king e6, who is not good. King c6 was better. For example, a4, rook c1, and now rook e1. The problem of play here king e6 is that after here we have the intermezzo move rook e3 first, and after king d6 a4, and we haven't the same plan, because if rook c1 rook e1, that's the key idea of why the king was bad place on e6. Very hard, of course, but here black have an extra resource that he missed with rook a5, attacking the pawn, rook a3, and now black should act very fast, because if not, white is going to be winning. With this, have the rook on a3 from behind benefits white so much. You should try to push always from behind with the pass pawn. Black formation was the opposite, have the rook on a1 and white have the rook in front of the pawn. But if you have a pass pawn, you should try to put your rook from behind of the pawn. But here black have resources because his king is more active, so king c5, king b4, and now important move king c3, not allowing the white king to activate. and reaching a draw. Instead of that, he missed that idea and he played king c6. And rook a3 was the best. And now rook f3. It's very hard, the position. You should play rook a3 and later rook f3 is very, very hard. And instead of that, he played rook f3, it's completely natural move. And f5, another mistake. The rook game is full of mistakes, but it's very natural, especially with this time control of no increment and later 10 seconds per move in the move 40. Rook a5 here was the best. And here, incredible move, instead of take on a4 DLD, because if you take on a4, rook f5 winning. Instead of take on a4, here king d6 was the drawing move, very, very hard to find. So f5, another mistake, and again rook a3 was the strongest move. And now black have no time to play king c3 and stop the white king. So great defense by. So this could be a great move by white. Instead of that, he played rook e3, rook a5, and finally he played rook a3. But okay, looks like white just lost a full tempo with rook e3 and rook a3 and rook a3. Because here we are in the same position like some moves ago. Okay, the pawn is on f5 and in the other position was on f6, on f7, sorry, but there is not a huge difference. And really, I think that benefits black. Because here, king e2, king here, rook here, and now the key move last in the other position was king c3, not allowing the white king to activate. The problem is that I think that he thought that rook e5 would be winning. King d3, rook d5, king e2, rook e5, king f1. But okay, this is a draw too. So, rook e5 was the best. I wasn't the best, but it's still being a draw. Because after rook a5, I don't see progress for white here. So, and rook a5 is the most natural move, just blockading the pawn, and I don't see. You are not going to take on a4, because if not, the king will come here. But okay, it depends on what he do. If he returns to e2, now we can just give check again, or play king c3. So, yes, rook a5 was the most natural move, just making the draw. Instead of that, GUKESH thought that he could just. That's maybe the problem of GUKESH, that he, instead of playing the normal move and natural move following the chess rules, he tries to calculate so much. And sometimes, okay, calculate is good, but sometimes it doesn't benefit him so much. Because without calculate, every grandmaster would make rook a5, keeping the position without calculate. But GUKESH try to solve everything with calculate. And if you have time in the clock, you can make that. But if you don't have time in the clock, as in this game, you could lose some lines and lose the game. He played king b3, who looks that is going to make a first draw, because after a5 his idea was king b2 and king b3, and he thought that he have the draw here, because okay, he's attacking the rook, and if the rook goes to another place which is not a1, he's going to lose the a5 pawn. But here he missed the move with f4. That's what happened when you put all you put all of your money into the calculation. In a rapid game, this type of things can happen, but that's the key move that GUKESH missed. f4, great move, and winning the game by FIROUZJA. Rook e4, and now rook e1, king b2, and the idea is that here white can leave with rook e1, rook a5, and rook e5, winning maneuver, and position is completely winning by FIROUZJA. He cannot take on e5, and all the pawns are going to fall. So, very interesting game by both sides. I think that GUKESH, with a better understanding of the chess, instead of trying to calculate everything, he could maybe draw this game with rook a5. But okay, he tried to calculate everything, and without time in the clock, he finally fails. So great game of FIROUZJA, who returns to the top of the leaderboard, and he's fighting with praggnanandhaa and wesleyso for the crown in the Norway chess. Let's see what happens in the last two rounds, and follow me to see more videos. Bye bye.